in front po. Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the ceremonial turnover and presentation of 1875 Carta General del Archipiélago Filipino. We are honored to have with us today at the Epifania de los Santos Auditorium at the National Library of the Philippines. This event also serves as an expression of our deep gratitude for the generosity of former Supreme Court Senior Associate Justice, the Honorable Antonio T. Carpio, whose invaluable contributions have greatly enriched the cartographic collections of the National Library. This meaningful partnership began with the donation of the map of the Philippines attached to the 1898 Treaty of Paris, generously given by Justice Carpio and his wife, the Honorable Ruth N. Carpio, on October 25, 2024. Subsequently, on December 11, 2025, the National Library formally accepted Part 1 of 1808, Carta General del Archipiélago Filipino from Justice Carpio. This remarkable map, now housed at the library's permanent gallery, stands as a vital historical artifact that deepens our understanding the Philippines' territorial and cultural heritage. Today's ceremonial turnover marks yet another significant addition to this growing collection, further strengthening the NLP's commitment to preserving and promoting nation's documentary heritage for present and future generations. This initiative also reflects Justice Carpio's advocacy in donating historical maps to institutions nationwide, aiming to deepen public awareness for the historical and legal foundations that safeguard our national territory and foster informed citizens. To begin our program, may we request everyone to please rise for the Philippine National Anthem.
Noon pa man, malaki na ang naging bahagi ng mga kababaihan sa lipunang Pilipino. Kaisa sila sa marubdob na paghahangad ng kalayaan ng ating lahi. Kabilang sila sa paglinang at makulay na sining at mayamang kultura. Kasapi sila sa pagtataguyod ng mga adhikain ng kapwa mamamayan at sa pagtugon sa mga pangangailangan ng lipunan. Katuwang sila sa pagtuklas sa mga larangan ng agham at medisina. Kapanalig sila sa pagpapairal ng batas, karapatan at katarungan para sa lahat. Kabahagi sila sa paglilingkod sa bayan at sa pagpapanatili ng demokrasyang Pilipino. Sa paglipas ng panahon, hindi nagmaliw ang kanilang pag-ibig sa ating inang bayan. Mga kababayan, ito ang alay ng mga kababaihang Pilipino para sa bayan. Tumayo po tayong lahat at sabay-sabay nating awitin ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas.
Ayaw magiliw, pero sa silanganan, alam ng puso, sa dilim mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, dulot na ng pag-ibig, sa manlulupin, ito magsisigil, sa lahat ng lubog, sa sigal at sa lalim mong baba. Maginagang tula at awit sa paglayang minamahal. Ang isang ng patawad mo'y talumpay na nagmilingin. Ang bituin at araw ng kailan pa may madilim. Lupa ng araw ng 𝗚𝗏𝗁 buhay namin sa piling mo. Ang higaya ng pagpay makahamit, ang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
Please be seated. At this point, we would like to recognize a few special people who attended our event today. First of all, please give a round of applause to former Ombudsman of the Philippines, Honorable Conchita Carpio Morales. Good afternoon, ma'am. Also with us is the Director General of the National Museum of the Philippines, Mr. 𝗷𝗵𝗵𝗶. With him is Deputy Director General 𝗚𝗲𝗵𝗵𝗹. Good afternoon, sir. And also we have the NHCP Commissioner, Ms. Maria Eloisa de Castro, with her husband, Professor Renato Cruz de Castro. Good afternoon po. We have also one of our donor din, Mr. 𝗚𝗿𝗵𝗹𝗶, the CEO of Asian Institute of Journalism and Communication and Chairman of Now Corporations. We have here also Mr. Bernan Joseph Corpus, the Deputy Executive Director from the National Commission for Culture and the Arts. Good afternoon, sir. And of course, our invited guest who registered online, varied yung ating attendees. They come from the academe, different government institutions, and also yung mga students po natin who would like to be part of this very important event. So good afternoon po sa inyong lahat. And also our friends from media, banggitin lang din po namin, from the GMA Integrated News, we have correspondents from Rappler, Inquirer, People's Television Network, Net25, and our usual partner, the Philippine Information Agency, and Business World. We would like also to inform everyone that we have a live streaming happening right now in our Facebook page so that all the Filipinos will be part of this very, very important event. All right. So to begin our program formally, may we call on the Director 4 of the National Library of the Philippines, Cesar Gilbert Q. Adriano, for his welcome remarks.
Thank you and good afternoon. So I will do away the greetings of our VIPs because it's already done. Today, we gather not just for a formal property exchange, but for a profound act of cultural homecoming. It is my honor to welcome you to the National Library of the Philippines for the ceremonial turnover of the 1875 Carta General del Archipiélago Filipino, a silent yet soaring witness to our nation's geographic soul. History comes alive through stories, but maps give them a place to stand. This 1875 chart transcends Spanish hydrography. It is a definitive blueprint of Filipino archipelago, capturing our island silhouette long before modern borders. Its intricate lines to unify our ancestors, diverse lands into a cohesive vision of nationhood, serving as a historical title deed to the very seas that define us. We are particularly privileged to have former Senior Associate Justice Antonio Carpio with us today to lead our on-site discussion. His presence elevates the ceremony from an archival presentation into a vital definition of our heritage. Acquiring this map is a victory for our collective memory. Beyond storing books, we also safeguard Filipino spirit. Now, a public treasure in our permanent collection, it will fuel historians, inspire students, and guide researchers exploring our maritime integrity. In a digital age, its tangible presence grounds us in deep, documented roots that no modern dispute can erase. To Justice Carpio, entrusting this masterpiece to us testifies to your commitment to the Filipino people. Placing is exactly where it belongs. So on behalf of the National Library of the Philippines, I accept this charge with gravity. As we unveil it today, remember, a map shows not just where we are, but the journey to get here and the vigilance required to stay. May this 1875 map and the insights to be shared today inspire us to navigate our future with precision, courage, and purpose of those who first chartered our seas. Thank you for sharing this historic milestone, and may our history endure. Muli, maligayang pagdating sa pambansang aklatan ng Pilipinas.
Thank you, Director Adriano. We will now proceed to the highlight of today's event, the ceremonial turnover and unveiling of the historic map 1875 Carta General del Archipiélago Filipino. This significant piece of history will now be generously donated by former Senior Associate Justice Antonio T. Carpio. May we invite on stage Director 𝗙𝗿𝗍𝗿 Adriano, Assistant Director Quiros, Justice Antonio T. Carpio, and Attorney Joseph Peter Callejo. We will do first the unveiling of the map. All right, let's count. In 3, 2, 1. Let's give a big round of applause. This is the 1875 Carta General del Archipiélago Filipino. May we invite our directors, Justice Carpio and Attorney Callejo, to please have your seat for the signing of our deed of donation. Sa atin po mga Zoom viewers, what you're seeing today is the signing of the deed of donation, of course, from our very generous donor, Justice Antonio Carpio, turning over the 1875 Carta General del Archipiélago Filipino. After this, we will have a short photo opportunity after the signing. And then we will proceed directly to the awarding of certificate of donation. Let's give a big round of applause. Okay, we'll take this opportunity to have a photo showing the signed deed of donation. And as I've said, we will go directly to the awarding of certificate of donation to Justice Carpio. This will be awarded by Director 𝗙𝗿𝗍𝗿 Adriano and Assistant Director 𝗙𝗿𝗿𝗶 Quiros. Let me just read the content of the certificate. This certificate of donation is proudly presented to Honorable Justice Antonio T. Carpio, former Associate Justice, Supreme Court of the Philippines, in grateful appreciation for donating the 1875 Carta General del Archipiélago Filipino to the National Library of the Philippines, given this 19th day of March 2026. Signed, 𝗙𝗿𝗍𝗿 Adriano, Director 4. Justice Carpio, a big round of applause. Thank you again, Director Adriano, Assistant Director Quiros, and Attorney Peter Callejo. Justice Carpio will remain on stage because we will proceed immediately to his special talk. All right. So we now move on to the special presentation of the 1875 Carta General del Archipiélago Filipino and its significance to Philippine national territory. I would like to make just a short introduction, although hindi na po kailangan ni Justice, but I will give Our speaker needs no lengthy introduction. He is a distinguished jurist and former Senior Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of the Philippines, widely respected for his integrity, legal scholarship, and steadfast commitment to public service. Beyond his distinguished career on the bench, Justice Antonio Carpio has played a pivotal role in advancing Philippine position on issues concerning national territory and maritime rights. He has been leading a voice in promoting public understanding of the country's entitlements under international law, particularly in relation to the West Philippine Sea. Through lectures, publications, and engagements with various institutions, both here and abroad, he has consistently advocated for the protection of nation sovereignty based on historical evidence and legal principles, including the landmark 2016 arbitral ruling under the United Nations Convention on Law of the Sea. His enduring efforts to educate Filipinos and international community have significantly contributed to strengthening awareness and informed discourse on safeguarding our national territory. Mga kasama, sabay-sabay po nating bigyan ng masibabong palakpakan Honorable Justice Antonio T. Carpio.
Pleasant afternoon to everyone. I wish to thank the National Library, headed by Director 𝗙𝗵𝗃 for hosting this event. And I'd like to explain a little bit about the 1875 Carta General del Archipiélago Filipino. This map is the most complete and detailed map of Philippine territory during the Spanish regime. So how was this map made? There was a fellow named Captain Claudio Montero. He was appointed as the first head of the Philippine Hydrographic Commission during the Spanish regime, and he had two ships. Those two ships went around the Philippines to conduct depth soundings and to survey the coasts to correct the map that they were improving and to come out with this new map. And Captain Montero produced this map, which is the most detailed and complete map that we have today. And you will see here 𝗷𝗿𝗁𝗵𝗶, that's 𝗙𝗵𝗹𝗶, and the entire Kalayaan Island group. Here is 𝗷𝗿𝗁𝗵𝗶 with the depth soundings, and the entire Kalayaan Island group with names, with depth soundings of every geologic feature. All the high tide features are here. So this is really the complete map of the Philippines. Now, Captain Montero spent most of his naval career in the Philippines, but we hardly know him. But we owe him a debt of gratitude because the map that he made is critical for establishing our sovereignty over 𝗙𝗵𝗃 and the Kalayaan Island group. So this was 1875 under the direction of Claudio Montero. This was issued by the Dirección Hidrografía of Spain, the mapping agency of Spain equivalent to our NAMRIA. At that time, they called these charts. They were not called mapping agencies, but charting agencies. And you will see here in the notes that at that time, Captain Montero was exchanging notes with the British. The British also surveyed the Spratlys. And so you will see here that the coast of Paraguay was confirmed by the survey of Commander Bate of the United UK of Britain, and the Strait of Basilan was adopted from the survey of Admiral Cecil, the French admiral who surveyed the Strait of Basilan, and the Balabac Strait came from the survey of Commander Reid of the UK Navy, the British Navy. So this was 1800s already, late 1800s, and the naval powers were exchanging notes already. But in the 1700s, they were keeping these charts secret. They were state secrets. But because of the need to have a safe navigation, they exchanged notes, they exchanged their hydrographic surveys so that there will be safe passage for all ships. So here you will see that Captain Montero, Claudio Montero, made a practice of exchanging copies of his surveys with Reid, Commander Reid of the UK Navy. And so this exchange of notes happened. They were comparing each other, confirming that the survey of Captain Montero was jibed with the survey of the British commanders. And how did they conduct hydrographic surveys? This is the plummet. This is a lead. Attached to the lead is a thin rope. You drop the lead and you measure the depths of the waters so that the ship will not run aground. You usually measure the depths of the waters around rocks or islands so the ship will not suffer the fate of Scarborough, the British ship that ran aground on Panakot. That's why the Europeans renamed the Panakot Scarborough Shoal, because the British ship Scarborough ran aground there. When the Americans came here after signing the Treaty of Paris, they found out that the map that they hurriedly cobbled together and attached to the Treaty of Paris was totally wrong. So they discarded the map that they made and adopted the 1875 Carta General as the map of Philippine territory during the American regime. They copied it exactly, but they just added the military telegraph lines, cable lines, eastern cable lines, military departments, and they issued it in 4 editions, 1899, 1900, 1901, and 1902. So if you go back in time to the 1910s, 1920s, 1930s, and you visited a government office here in Manila or a US military office in Manila, you will see this map, that one, because this was issued by the Americans in 4 editions. But unfortunately, I've asked around in our public libraries, public museums, private libraries, private museums. We don't have a copy of this map. I asked the members of the Philippine Map Collector Society. They don't have a copy. But one of them who deals in maps offered to sell me his copy, and this is it. So this appears to me to be the only copy right now in the Philippines. And I asked a historian how come we don't have a copy anymore. She said that during when Japan invaded the Philippines, they destroyed a lot of our records, and they probably destroyed also all the maps showing this map, because Japan also claimed the Spratlys in 1939. And the Spratlys here appear as part of the Philippines. So if you look at the Scarborough Shoal in 3 official maps, you will see the 1734 Pedro Murillo Velarde map, the first official map of Philippine territory during the Spanish regime. You see here Panakot. And in the 1808 Carta General del Archipiélago Filipino, the second official map of Philippine territory during the Spanish regime, you will see here 𝗷𝗿𝗶𝗹𝗴 or Scarborough with depth soundings already, because in 1800, Captain Francisco Riquelme of the Spanish Navy made a survey, hydrographic survey of Scarborough Shoal, and this was inserted in the 1808 map. And in the 1875 map, in this map, you will see here 𝗷𝗿𝗶𝗹𝗴 or Scarborough Shoal with depth soundings. These are all official maps of Philippine territory during the Spanish regime. And there are some people who've been saying that Panakot is not Scarborough Shoal. Well, let's go to the historical maps. This is a map by Bellan. He was the official hydrographer of the French Navy at that time, and he made a map of the Philippines. And you can see here, Panakot o Bao de Masinloc. So Panakot is Bao de Masinloc. This is a 1752 map. And you will see here also another map. By Gongora, a Spanish cartographer, Bajo de Masinloc o Panakot. So Panakot is Bajo de Masinloc. This is 1790. And you will see here another map by Antonio Zata. You will see here Bajo de Masinloc o Panakot. This is 1799. And in 1937, the U.S. Coast Survey, director of the Coast Survey of the U.S. wrote to the U.S. High Commissioner in Manila saying that we have all charts here in our office. They show several shoals of the west coast of Luzon. One is listed as Bao de Masinloc o Panakot. So 1937, people with knowledge of these maps knew that Panakot is Bao de Masinloc. And this is the map of 1800, the one I mentioned, Captain Francisco Riquelme. He went there to Bao de Masinloc to conduct the first ever hydrographic survey, measuring the depths of the rocks. And he, in his notes here, Bajo de Masinloc o Scarborough. So Panakot is Bao Masinloc is Scarborough. That's it. And the 1808 map, official map, it says Bao de Masinloc or Scarborough. In this map, 1875, Bao de Masinloc or Scarborough. So Panakot is Bao de Masinloc is Scarborough. And so it cannot be disputed that Panakot is Scarborough Shoal. How about the Calayan Island Group? This is the Calayan Island Group, the Los Baos de Paragua. Paragua is the old Spanish name for Palawan. Los Baos means the shoals. The shoals of Palawan, those are the Spratlys. And it's here in the 1734 Pedro Murillo Velarde map, Los Baos de Paragua. In the 1808 map, it's more detailed now. You have names of the islands, but not yet complete. The Spaniards were still going to the islands to conduct depth soundings, giving names, but it appears already in the 1808 Carta General del Archipiélago Filipino. And finally, in the 1875 Carta General, it's complete. The entire Spratlys are here with names, with depth soundings, complete. So if you look at this map, this is the 1875 Carta General, you will see here Tito, that's Pag-asa. Our largest island in the Calayan Island Group is Pag-asa. It's here. It's the edge of Philippine territory. In this map of 1875, this is the edge of Philippine territory. This is Tito, Pag-asa, and you have Loita. We call that Kota, second largest island that we occupy. And 𝗷𝗶𝗶𝗶 is here. That's the largest island, 47 hectares, but presently occupied by Taiwan. So if you compare this with the present-day Namria map, this is the Calayan Island Group. You have here Pag-asa, Kota, and Ligao. So this is Tito, that's Pag-asa, it's here, Pag-asa. This is Loita, that's Kota. This is 𝗷𝗶𝗶𝗶, that's Ligao. We call 𝗷𝗶𝗶𝗶 Ligao. So it's more or less coincides. This is the edge of Philippine territory under present-day Namria map. This is the edge of Philippine territory in the 1875 Carta General. Very few people know that a map was attached to the 1898 Treaty of Paris. And this is the map. And when the US Senate ratified the treaty, they were looking at this map. So you can see here the lines of the Treaty of Paris. It turns sharply to the left to include a large part of the Spratlys, turns sharply to the right to include the Sultan of Sulu territory in Sabah. That's how the US Senate approved the Treaty of Paris. But there was a problem, because the text of the treaty, of the 1898 Treaty of Paris, provided for the geographical coordinates, the longitude, latitude, longitude, latitude. And if you connect all of this, this is how it will appear. The lines do not turn sharply to the left to include the Spratlys. It slants downward to totally exclude the Spratlys, turns sharply to the right to exclude Cagayan de Sulu and Cebuto. So the text of the treaty did not match with the map attached to the treaty. And that was the problem, because after signing the Treaty of Paris of 1898, the Americans came here, and the Spanish garrison in Cagayan de Sulu and Cebuto refused to vacate. They said, if you draw the lines, we are outside the Treaty of Paris. We were not ceded to the US, so we will not vacate. And so there was a dispute. So the Americans, the treaty lines excluded a lot of islands, Scarborough Shoal, in the Batanes, and in Cagayan de Sulu and Cebuto. So the Americans went back to the Spaniards and said, hey, let's correct the Treaty of Paris because there are so many islands lying outside the lines. And so they negotiated, and the Secretary of State wrote the Spanish ambassador in Washington, D.C., and he said that our intention when we signed the 1898 Treaty of Paris was that all the territorial sovereignty of Spain in that part of the Western Pacific should be ceded to us. Everything that you owned in that part of the Western Pacific should be ceded to us. And the Spanish ambassador replied, we lost the war. You dictated to us what to sign. You dictated to us the geographical coordinates. What is excluded from those, what was excluded from what was demarcated in those coordinates remain under the sovereignty of Spain. They're correct, because if there's a dispute, conflict between the text and the map, the text will prevail. That's the rule of interpretation of statutes or treaties. So there was this exchange of notes, very acrimonious. Finally, the Americans said, okay, to cut this story short, this dispute short, we will pay you an additional $50,000. The Spaniards said, no, that's too little. The U.S. increased the offer to $100,000, and the Spaniards said, yes, we will sign a treaty clarifying that everything, all other islands belonging to the Philippine archipelago are also ceded to the U.S. And the Spanish ambassador in Washington wrote his superior in Madrid, and he said, I am about to sign this Treaty of Washington. There is only one article. It's actually one of the shortest treaties in the world. It is drawn in such a manner as to include other islands outside the limits of the Treaty of Paris. So everything else will be ceded to the US, everything else that were omitted in the 1898 Treaty of Paris. And so that is exactly what the treaty says. Very short treaty. Spain relinquishes to the US any and all islands belonging to the Philippine archipelago lying outside the lines of the Treaty of Paris, as if they have been fully included within those lines when the treaty was signed in 1898. So it even retroacted. We have forgotten about this treaty, the Treaty of Washington. And if you go to YouTube, you will see there's Senator, then Senator Enrile, who became the chief presidential legal counsel of President Marcos Jr. He said, wag na natin pag-usapan yung Scarborough. Hindi sa atin yan. It's outside the lines of the Treaty of Paris. And if you go to Father Bernas in his article in December 2012 in Inquirer, he said, all these islands, the Scarborough and the Spratlys, are not included in the cession of 1898. We cannot claim it as having been ceded to us under treaty law, we have to find other general principles of international law to claim it, and he couldn't cite any principle of international law. And 𝗙𝗿𝗏 Mendoza, he wrote an article in the Philippine Judicial Academy Journal. He said, we never claimed the Spratlys until 1978 when PD 5096 was issued. That was 1978 already. So there is this misconception that what was ceded by Spain to the US were only the islands within the treaty lines. Everybody forgot about the Treaty of Washington and why the Treaty of Washington was signed. And it even misled the Chinese, because the Chinese kept on echoing what our public intellectuals were saying, that those 𝗙𝗏𝗏𝗃 and the Spratlys were not ceded in a treaty by Spain. So in 1938, the Philippine government was run by the Philippine Commonwealth, already made up of, these were Filipinos already, and our leaders at that time really had a very good foresight. They said, some country might claim 𝗙𝗏𝗏𝗃. Let us put a lighthouse there as a marker that it belongs to the Philippines. And someone said, but it's outside the treaty lines. So they decided to ask the Secretary of State of the US, is 𝗙𝗏𝗏 part of Philippine territory? And the reply was this: because there are no other claimants to 𝗙𝗏𝗏𝗃, the shoal should be regarded as included among the islands ceded to the US in the American-Spanish Treaty of Washington. That's the November 7, 1900 Treaty of Washington. So here is the US State Department. This is under international law that's binding on the US, because there are two officials of a state that could bind the state, the head of state or the foreign minister, and the Secretary of State is the foreign minister. And so the US said, yes, it's part of Philippine territory and you can put up that lighthouse. So this actually applied the Treaty of Washington, that what was ceded in the Treaty of Washington were all other islands belonging to the Philippine archipelago lying outside the lines. So the Americans were so enamored with this 1875 map because it was really complete with depth soundings all over the islands, that they issued it 4 times. After the signing of the Treaty of Paris in 1899, they already issued it. And in 1900, even before the Treaty of Washington, they signed it. They issued the 2nd edition after the signing of the Treaty of Washington. And then in 1902, the last edition, this is it. This is the last edition, the 1902 edition. So there is this famous case, the 𝗚𝗏𝗏𝗃 case. It's the first arbitration of a territorial dispute in Asia between the US and the Netherlands over an island in Mindanao, off the coast of Mindanao, island of Palmas. And it was Spain that first discovered it and put it in the map. It's in the map here. But Spain never returned to the island after discovering it. It was the Dutch in Indonesia that went there, and there were several people living in that island, and the people there signed a Pledge of Allegiance recognizing the sovereignty of the Netherlands over them. So they recognized themselves as subjects of the Netherlands, and they flew the Dutch flag. One day, the Governor General in Manila at that time, Governor Leonard Wood, went to Mindanao on a visit aboard the steamship, and he carried with him the 1875 map. And when reaching the area of southern tip of Mindanao, he saw an island with the Dutch flag flying. He said, why is the Dutch flag flying there? This is supposed to be Islas Palmas, part of Philippine territory. And that triggered the first territorial arbitration in Asia. The US and the Netherlands were in good terms at the time, so they submitted it to arbitration. And so Max Huber, you see this was the sole arbiter. This is the tip of Mindanao, and you will see here Islas Palmas. It's very close. So if you go to YouTube, there's a video of the people there in Islas Palmas speaking Tagalog. because they came from Mindanao. And their children actually study in General Santos, and many have become Filipino citizens. They don't have border controls here. You just cross the sea and you will be in the Jangas or General Santos. And this is it. Miangas, at that time in 1928, during the arbitration, it is about 700 people living there. There's now an airstrip, a very beautiful place. And what was the ruling of Max Huber? Because the Americans submitted this map as proof that island of Palmas is part of Philippine territory. The Americans submitted the map. And the Max Huber, the arbiter, acknowledged. So you submitted an official or semi-official map made by Captain Montero, Claudio Montero, who made this. But the U.S., Max Huber said, but discovery alone is not sufficient. To complete your title of sovereignty, you must exercise continuous and peaceful display of sovereignty. And it was the Dutch in Indonesia that exercised continuous and peaceful display of sovereignty because they went there several times periodically, and the people there acknowledged the sovereignty of Netherlands. But Max Huber left us with something. He said, I'm deciding this because this is an inhabited island. I will decide this differently if it is uninhabited. But he was very cryptic. So we go to the next case, 𝗚𝗏𝗏 Island. 𝗚𝗏𝗏 Island is about 1,000 kilometers away from Mexico. It's uninhabited. There's no water there. It's uninhabitable. In 1858, a French merchant ship commissioned by the French Navy went there, and the French naval officer read a proclamation. France is claiming 𝗚𝗏𝗏 Island today as part of the French Union. And after doing that, without even leaving any marker in the island, the French officer went to Hawaii, the nearest island with the government, and took out a 2-by-2-inch advertisement. Today, France claimed 𝗚𝗏𝗏 Island as part of the French Union. And France never returned to the island for 39 years until 1897 when Mexico claimed the island. So two countries claiming the same island, they decided to submit it to arbitration by King Emmanuel of Italy. And this is the ruling, that since the island is completely uninhabited, no other claimant except France. When France, therefore, first appeared there, its title became complete. So if the island is uninhabited or uninhabitable, and you are the first claimant, you get a complete title. You do not have to show continuous and peaceful display of sovereignty, because if you go to the island, the turtles and the crabs will not sign a Pledge of Allegiance. So it's a useless act, and the law will not require you to do a useless act. And we go to the next case, Greenland. This is Eastern Greenland, very cold. In the 1700s, the King of Denmark claimed the entire Greenland, but he colonized only the western part because this is warmer. The eastern part, you cannot live there. It's totally cold. And in 1932, Norway claimed the eastern part. So two countries claiming the same territory, Eastern Greenland. So they agreed to submit it to arbitration by the Permanent Court of International Arbitration. And this is the ruling. When Denmark claimed it in the 1700s, there were no other claimants. And that part, the eastern part, is so cold, you cannot live there. Therefore, it is uninhabitable. Therefore, there was no need for Denmark to inhabit it, to colonize it, because the law will not require you to do the impossible. And therefore, the title of Denmark became complete when they first claimed it in 1721. And you have President Trump trying to claim it today. It's too late. He said just because a boatload of Danes went there in the 1700s, they can claim it. No, there's a lot of history behind this, and there's already a ruling by the Permanent Court of International Justice. So you have three cases. One case says if it is inhabited, you have to exercise continuous and peaceful display of sovereignty, what they call effectivities. But if it is uninhabited or uninhabitable, you don't have to do anything. The mere fact that you are the first claimant, nobody else claimed it, then the title vests in you immediately. So we apply this to the Spratlys and the Scarborough Shoal. In 1734, in that Pedro Murillo Velarde map, the Spaniards, Spain claimed Scarborough Shoal and the Spratlys as part of Philippine territory. Nobody lived in Scarborough Shoal. Not a single blade of grass grows there. You cannot squeeze a single drop of fresh water. It's uninhabitable. So, based on these rulings, our title became complete in 1734. Title over Scarborough Shoal. How about the Spratlys? Nobody lived there before. In the arbitral award of July 12, 2016, the tribunal said, no historical record of human habitation in the Spratlys. And it is, moreover, uninhabitable because there's no water there. When it rains, there's water in the aquifer, but after 3 months, the water is gone. So the ruling was that not a single island of the Spratlys was habitable. And therefore, when Spain claimed it in 1734, the title of Spain became complete. That should be our position. Let's forget about Tomas Cloma, about the rest, because they came too late in the game. Now, in the Treaty of Washington, what was ceded were islands. Spain relinquished to the US islands, any and all islands. At that time, an island had only a 3 nautical mile territorial sea as accessory to the land territory. So when Spain ceded the islands, it included the 3 nautical mile territorial sea, but nothing more, because that was customary international law. Territorial sea limit was 3 nautical miles. So what is the frame of reference when Spain says we cede to the US any and all islands belonging to the Philippine archipelago lying outside the lines? Where is that map? Where is that document showing the islands of the Philippine archipelago lying outside the lines? It is this map. This map shows the islands. You draw the Treaty of Paris lines. Anything outside of the Treaty of Paris lines were ceded in the Treaty of Washington. That is the importance of this map. It shows the islands of the Philippine archipelago lying outside the lines of the Treaty of Paris, which were ceded in the second treaty. So this map is an old map that we have to be reacquainted with again, because we have forgotten this map. That is, as far as I know, that's the only existing original print of the map. So how do we depict the Philippine archipelago in maps, in the internet? We have to draw these red lines to show that there was a second treaty which included these islands. Otherwise, if you show only the original treaty lines, people will be misled, and this misled China. Now, in 1930, there was a treaty between the United Kingdom and the US demarcating our boundary in southern Philippines. And in that treaty, there are two whereas clauses which defined Philippine archipelago. Philippine archipelago is a territory acquired by the US in the Treaty of Paris, this is the 1898 treaty, and the Treaty of 1900, that's the Treaty of Washington. The same, Philippine archipelago, the treaty acquired by the US in the Treaty of Paris of 1898 and the Treaty of Washington. So a treaty, this is a treaty, is part of our domestic law. So there is a legal definition of Philippine archipelago. This is it. When we speak of Philippine archipelago, we refer to the islands ceded to the US by Spain in two treaties, the Treaty of Paris of 1898 and the Treaty of Washington of 1900. So, since the UK signed that treaty, Malaysia, as successor to UK, is bound. So Malaysia cannot actually claim any part of the Spratlys because Malaysia just inherited British North Borneo from UK. In 1943, China, which was then controlled by the Kuomintang, issued a handbook to introduce itself to the world. So this is an official publication by the Republic of China before the communists took over the government. And in their chapter 1, they defined the territory of China. In the south, the southernmost territory of China is Triton Island of the Paracel Group. So in 1943, China announced to the world that their southernmost territory was Triton Island of the Paracels. This is the book. I have a copy of that. So to reach Spratlys and 𝗙𝗏𝗄𝗃, you have to cross the South China Sea high seas. In 1947, China revised the handbook. And for the first time in Chinese history, China claimed the Spratlys. They call it the Coral Islands. But in the same claim, China said it is also claimed by the Philippines and the French in Indochina. So China claimed the Spratlys for the first time in its history in this book, 1947. But China made a fatal defect. China said there is a prior claimant, the Philippines and France. To claim a territory, it must be terra nullius, land that is not owned or claimed by anyone. In 1947, the Spratlys were no longer terra nullius. France, we claimed it. The Spaniards claimed it since 1734. France claimed it in 1933. Japan claimed it in 1939. So it was no longer terra nullius in 1947. So that's the defect of the claim of China. That's the handbook. Now, why did China make that admission that the Philippines had a pre-existing claim to the Spratlys? This is now my guess. This is not backed up by records. My educated guess is that during the Civil War in China, the Kuomintang were fighting the communists, and the Americans supported the Kuomintang, Chiang Kai-shek, headed by Chiang Kai-shek, and the Americans sent hundreds of military advisors to China. And those military advisors came from Manila as a jump-off point. And so those Americans were familiar with the 1875 map because they see this in all offices, military offices in the Philippines at the time. So they must have told the Kuomintang officers that, hey, the Spratlys are already claimed by the Philippines. So they put there already claimed by the Philippines. That's my educated guess because I have not found any document supporting that. In 1947, China published its infamous 9-dash line, and this is it, together with the 1947 handbook. they published this. But you will see here in the Sprat list, they gave names, but the names came from British names in the British hydrographic chart. So they just transliterated the English names to Chinese names. And in Scarborough, you see here Scarborough, but without a name. We are already in 1947, but China has still no name for Scarborough Shoal. So the question is, what was transferred or ceded by Spain to the US in the Treaty of Paris of 1898? Because there are those who claim that the waters within the Treaty of Paris lines were also ceded. If you look at the treaty, Spain cedes to the US the archipelago known as the Philippine Islands, consisting of the islands, comprehending the islands lying within the line. So what was ceded were the islands. And an island had a 3 nautical mile territorial sea at that time under customary international law. And also in the Treaty of Washington, what was ceded were any and all islands. Only the islands were ceded, not all the waters within the Treaty of Paris lines. And if you look at all our constitutions, we always say in the 1935 Constitution, we follow generally accepted principles of international law as part of the law of land. That's automatic. We follow the automatic incorporation. So international law, customary international law automatically forms part of Philippine law without need of legislation. That's also in the 73 Constitution. That's also in the 87 Constitution. So we have been consistent. We follow customary international law automatically without need of legislation. And from 19th century to the 1967, the customary international law was the territorial sea was 3 nautical miles. There's no doubt about that. In 1967, a majority of coastal states have now shifted. They now consider 12 nautical mile territorial sea. So that is now the customary international law as of 1967. In 1994, UNCLOS took effect, and it states expressly in Article 3, every state has the right to establish the breadth of its territorial sea up to a limit not exceeding 12 nautical miles. We ratified UNCLOS in 1984, and if you ratify a convention or a treaty, that treaty or convention becomes part of domestic law. So this became part of domestic law. So, and the incorporation is automatic without need of legislation. And the UNCLOS says, when you ratify UNCLOS, you cannot make any reservation or exception unless expressly allowed by the convention itself. There is no provision in the Constitution that allows a state to claim more than 12 nautical miles territorial sea. Everybody is bound by the 12 nautical miles, no exception whatsoever. So even if when we ratified it, even if we said that it does not prejudice our rights to the Treaty of Paris, it cannot refer to the territorial sea because we cannot make a reservation when it comes to the territorial sea. We have to accept a 12 nautical mile territorial sea. And UNCLOS also says that when you make a declaration or statement, yes, you can, but you cannot modify the legal effect of the provisions of the convention. So when you ratify UNCLOS, you have to accept 12 nautical mile territorial sea. There is no other way. Now, at that time, before we ratified UNCLOS, the US US and its allies were conducting freedom of navigation operations beyond our 12 nautical mile territorial sea, because we claimed as our territorial sea all the waters within the Treaty of Paris lines. just to show to us that the world didn't agree with this claim, the US, every year, they would conduct freedom of navigation operations. So it's very clear. Now, when the case of 𝗚𝗏𝗁 versus 𝗚𝗏𝗏𝗃 was filed, we already ratified UNCLOS in 1984. It took effect 1994. So at the latest, by 1994, we were already bound by that territorial limit of 12 nautical miles. We cannot claim more than 12 nautical miles. That's the effect of the effectivity of the treaty, the UNCLOS treaty. It is as if we have adopted this provision as part of the law of the land. So when 𝗚𝗏𝗁 and the other petitioners filed the petition, the prevailing law was we cannot exceed 12 nautical miles. But what did 𝗚𝗏𝗁 and 𝗚𝗏𝗏𝗃 want? They claimed that our territorial sea should extend to the 1898 treaty lines that will include exclusive economic zone and the high seas. So the 12 nautical mile is represented by this red line. This is the exclusive economic zone, the blue lines, and these are the high seas. Under UNCLOS, we can only claim as our territorial sea the red lines. We cannot claim this because these are exclusive economic zone waters, and these are the high seas. But the petitioners 𝗚𝗏𝗁 et al. Wanted that we make the entire waters, all the waters within the treaty lines as our territorial sea. That would violate UNCLOS. And that's why the court was unanimous in saying we cannot do that. And I penned the decision, and the 𝗚𝗏𝗁 et al. Petitioners are still questioning today that I surrendered 240,000 square kilometers of territorial sea. I said, you cannot surrender something that you never owned, because nobody believed us. We were the only ones claiming beyond 12 nautical miles. And it's even against our constitution. So, and the problem is, China claims, this is the 9-dash line of China. So China is claiming our EEZ. If we decided otherwise in 𝗚𝗏𝗁, assuming we sided with the petitioners, then we will be quarreling with China, because China will be claiming our EEZ here as their territory, where we claim it also as our territorial sea. And the Americans, they now sail here and tell the Chinese, these are not your waters, this is the EEZ of the Philippines. But if we sided with the petitioners in 𝗚𝗏𝗁 and said these are territorial waters, they would be sailing here again. All the US and its allies that are today supporting us against China will flip and will be conducting freedom of navigation operations here to tell us these are not your territorial waters, because these are beyond 12 nautical miles. We will be an outcast in international law. Nobody will support our claim. So two outcasts, China and the Philippines, nobody supports them. That will be the effect. There is also a problem because the Constitution says the state shall protect its marine wealth in the exclusive economic zone. So if this is our territorial sea, where what the petitioners in 𝗚𝗏𝗁 want, our exclusive economic zone will start from the edge of the lines of the Treaty of Paris. So nobody will support us. How can we implement this provision when it's against international law, and the world will be against us? And here, this is the boundary. This is the boundary with Indonesia. This is the exclusive economic zone already of Indonesia. We will be fighting Indonesia. So what the petitioners in Magallanes wanted was we claim beyond 200 nautical miles. Nobody, not a single country claims beyond 200 nautical miles as its territorial sea. But two countries claim up to 200 nautical miles as their territorial sea, Peru and El Salvador, but they are not parties to UNCLOS. Somalia used to claim a 200 nautical mile territorial sea, but just before it joined UNCLOS, it amended its law to claim only 12 nautical mile territorial sea. Even China does not claim more than 12 nautical mile territorial sea. What China is saying, beyond the 12 nautical mile territorial sea, we have historic rights. They don't claim it as territorial sea because that's against UNCLOS. They claim it as historic rights. So we went to UNCLOS and took the position that those historic rights are not authorized under UNCLOS because under UNCLOS, all historic rights beyond the territorial sea were extinguished. To preserve peace and stability in the ocean and the seas of the world, you can claim only up to 12 nautical miles. You cannot claim historic rights. You can claim only in accordance with the UNCLOS. Beyond 12 nautical miles, you can claim an exclusive economic zone. But you have to follow UNCLOS because if you allow historic rights, then Rome, Italy will claim the entire Mediterranean because the Romans called it Mare Nostrum or sea. And Spain and Portugal will claim the New World, all the seas of the New World because they divided it in the Papal Bull. So under UNCLOS, all historic claims beyond the territorial sea, beyond 12 nautical miles were extinguished. That's why you cannot use the Treaty of Paris lines anymore. And no country in modern times has claimed a territorial sea beyond 200 nautical miles. We will be the first had we approved, we sided with the petitioners in Magallanes. So the last sentence in my decision in Magallanes is that Republic Act 9522, which realigned our baselines in accordance with the UNCLOS, is a most vital step on the part of the Philippines in safeguarding its maritime zones, consistent with the Constitution and national interest. Why is it a most vital step? Because I was thinking already that we would sue China on its 9-dash line. We will bring China to an arbitral tribunal. And in fact, after this became final, 3 months later, I launched my advocacy to bring China to an arbitral tribunal. And there are two principles that would be a problem for us. First, there's the principle of he who comes to court must come with clean hands. So if you sue China, that China violated UNCLOS, the judges will ask, are you not violating UNCLOS also by claiming a territorial sea more than 12 nautical miles? And in fact, that was asked by one of the judges. One of the judges in the tribunal said, you are questioning China's 9-dash line. It's because it violates UNCLOS. You have your equivalent. You're claiming as your territorial sea all the waters within the Treaty of Paris lines. But we said, Your Honor, we already amended this, Republic Act 9522, and also the decision in Magallanes versus Ermita. So how do you put all of this together? There is a very strong principle in international law, 𝗷𝗍 possidetis juris. It says that the boundaries established by the colonial powers for their colonies are sacrosanct, and they must be respected by all states, whether parties to the treaties that establish the boundaries or successors, or third parties if they did not object on time. So we have 3 treaties defining our territory, the 1898 Treaty of Paris, 1900 Treaty of Washington, and the 1930 Treaty with the British demarcating our boundary in southern Philippines. That is covered by this principle of 𝗷𝗍 possidetis juris. It says that those boundaries established by the colonial powers for their colonies as they existed when they became independent are sacrosanct. They must be respected by all states. Nobody objected to the 1898 Treaty of Paris, the 1900 Treaty of Washington, or the 1930 Treaty with the British. China did not object. In fact, in the arbitration at The Hague, China submitted a position paper. China said, we are not participating, but this is our position. Philippine territory is defined in 3 treaties, and they even quoted our constitution. Philippine territory is defined in 3 treaties, and it's limited to the islands within the treaty lines. They did not look into the history of the Treaty of Washington. So China admitted before a judicial body, that's the highest form of admission. China cannot get out of that. So China admits that Philippine territory is defined in 3 treaties. So they are bound by that. And the 𝗷𝗵𝗶𝗹𝗴 juris principle is a very strong principle because the colonial powers divided Africa and Latin America on a table survey. They drew straight lines, vertical and horizontal lines defining the boundaries, and one tribe may be straddling both sides of the boundary. So when these 2 countries became independent, they would go to war to claim the other side, the people living on the other side. So to prevent these wars, boundary wars, international developed this principle, 𝗷𝗵𝗶𝗹𝗴 juris. Those boundaries established by the colonial powers for their colonies should not be disturbed. They are binding on all states. It binds China. So today I'm distributing that. I've been distributing this map all over the country. We celebrated the 150th year anniversary of this map, and you can get a high-resolution copy. You can download it from this website, the 𝗚𝗲𝗏 website, or the DFA website. The DFA shows the 1875 map of Spain itself, not the US version, but this one is the US version, this one. So finally, I have this 4 maps project. They're all here now, all these 4 maps, because I have a vision that when students come here, they look at the maps and you don't have to explain to them that 𝗙𝗏𝗁 and the Spratlys form part of Philippine territory by just looking at the map. So Pedro Muriel Velarde map, an original print is here, courtesy of my friend Mel Velarde here. This is the 1808 map. We have the first part here, but the second part, I'm still looking for it. This is the 3rd map, that's the 1875. And this map is here also, the Treaty of Paris map. So we're almost done. And the school children can come here and you don't have to explain to them that 𝗙𝗏𝗁 and the Spratlys are definitely Philippine territory. Thank you. I end my... Thank you.
Another round of applause for Justice Antonio T. Carpio for that very in-depth presentation, not only about this 1875 Carta General, but all the other maps. As Justice Carpio mentioned, these 4 maps were already available, permanently displayed in our permanent gallery. So if you have still a few minutes or time to visit our permanent gallery after this event, we would like to invite everyone po. Bukas po ang ating permanent gallery later. All right? So we now open the floor for a short question and answer. We have, ayun, may 2 po tayong microphones on the side. Kung gusto po ninyong i-address ang ating question to Justice Carpio, although he already explained it clearly, no, yung atin pong mga dapat malaman regarding our national territory. So, who would like to start the question? Please mention your name and your institution po before you ask your question. So, anyone from the group? Also, our participants sa Zoom, sorry, sa Facebook Live, ayan. They can also ask question po. I am monitoring our live session today. So baka meron po kayong gusto pang linawin regarding our national territory. Sige po. Who would like to start? Habang nag-iisip tayo ng question, just a sharing, no, Justice Carpio. Many of our tours, we are handling a guided tour, and every time we present to our students, mga librarians, they are very surprised na meron po palang Treaty of Washington. Because all they know is the Treaty of Paris. So these maps will, it's about time that this will be part of our discussion, especially for our educators, ano? Maging part ito ng atin pong pagtuturo, and so it will become part of our conversation. All right, meron na po tayong question on the side. Ma'am, please state your name and your institution po.
Yes, I'm Marites Vitug. I write for Rappler. So Justice Carpio, you're aware of this. In February 1990, our then ambassador to Germany, 𝗷𝗶𝗶𝗶𝗹, wrote a letter saying that the Reef does not fall within the territorial sovereignty of the Philippines. So that means, I mean, what's the mystery of the 1900 Treaty of Washington? How come we didn't know about it? And how come we have forgotten it? Or wasn't it taught to during our history classes?
Well, in law school, during my time, it was not taught. We were only taught the Treaty of Paris. So everybody assumed that Philippine territory was limited to the islands within the treaty lines. And the Chinese took this hook, line, and sinker, and they cite our Stellito Mendoza, Father Bernas, and Senator Enrile. They say even your own luminaries, legal luminaries, agree that Philippine territory is limited to the islands within the treaty lines. That's why we have to re-educate everybody or to inform everybody that there was a second treaty. And we have forgotten about this. And it's very clear. You cannot get away from it because it's there. There was a second treaty, and it's very clear that in the first treaty, the Spratlys were included per the approval of the US Senate because they approved it based on the map, although the text did not jibe with it. So the intention was really to include the Spratlys from the very start. That was corrected in the 1900 Treaty of Washington, where everything else was included. I think we were remiss in in researching this, but we had to answer China, and we had to find an answer also to this claim of Father Bernas, of Enrile and Stellito Mendoza that Philippine territory is limited to the islands within the treaty lines. So we did that research. And also about this letter of Ambassador Tan, this is not the first time that China raised this. They raised this before. First of all, the rule in international law is only the head of state or the foreign minister can issue a statement of a letter binding the state. So, or you may be an ambassador or undersecretary, but your statements are not binding on the state. So international law recognizes only the head of state and the foreign minister. And there are many cases involving this already. That's why they have to be careful. That's why during the time of Duterte, he said, pamigay na lang natin yan. So I said, I called up the Secretary Manalo at that time. I said, you have to take that back because that is binding on us. So it binds only the state when it's the head of state or the foreign minister that makes the declaration. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Justice Carpio, and thank you, ma'am, for that question. We have another question. Yes, ma'am.
Hello po, good afternoon. I'm 𝗚𝗲𝗁 from UP Manila. Can I ask lang po, ano pa pong pwedeng usapin ang idahilan po sa The Hague laban po sa China? Thank you po.
Can you please repeat?
Ano pa pong pwedeng usapin or ang pwede pa pong idahilan sa The Hague laban po sa China?
Well, I have recommended that we file a new arbitration case on the extended continental shelf because Vietnam and Malaysia filed a joint claim. This is the area beyond 200 nautical miles of our EEZ. We also filed our claim, and this was all opposed by China. And under the rules of the UN Commission on the limits of the continental shelf, they will not act on the claims anymore because they will allow the parties to decide among themselves or to bring the issue to arbitration. So I've been recommending that we bring it to arbitration already because this dispute will be frozen unless we move. And every day China becomes stronger economically and financially and militarily. So we are at the losing end if we don't act now. Thank you.
Thank you so much po.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir. Just a follow-up question, sir, no? Since natanong po iyon, since we already achieved the 2016 arbitral victory, and yet, currently, many of our fishermen, Filipino fishermen, experience harassment, is the Philippines filing another case on that?
Well, I have recommended that we file a case for preventing our fishermen from fishing in the territorial sea of 𝗙𝗏𝗄𝗃 because the July 12, 2016 award says the territorial sea of 𝗙𝗏𝗄𝗃 is a common fishing ground. So we should be able to fish there. But the Chinese have prevented us and the Vietnamese from fishing, and only Chinese fishermen allowed to fish. So it's a clear case. We can go to an arbitral tribunal and demand damages for our fisher folk. But, my recommendation has not been taken up by the government. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Some more questions on the side. Yes, ma'am.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm 𝗚𝗲𝗁𝗃, writer, editor for 𝗙𝗶𝗃𝗶 pages, member editor of the National Media Association of the Philippines. China's always been tricky in putting up a second phase to the West Philippine Sea problem. Since the last filing of our case was still way beyond 2016, it's already 2026. And there has been quite a number of a filing of diplomatic protests, but seems it's not being seriously taken. If we file another legal case against China, is it going to be the same legal court of The Hague, or is there another way where we can file a case wherein so that all of these violations and abuses can be recorded? How do we do that? Where do we file it again?
Well, we'll file with the UNCLOS tribunal, still under UNCLOS, or we can also file it with the International Court of Justice. But my recommendation is we stick to UNCLOS. The 2016 Arbitral Award is about 10 years old now. And the question is, what benefits have we derived from that award? Well, one, because of the Arbitral Award, the US and its allies sail in the West Philippine Sea, and they conduct naval drills. China is saying you cannot conduct naval drills. You can only sail on innocent passage. You cannot conduct naval drills because that is within the 10-dash line. That's quasi-national territory of China. But of course, the US and its allies will cite the Arbitral Award. Under the Arbitral Award, this is the EEZ of the Philippines, and under UNCLOS, in the EEZ, there's freedom of navigation and overflight, including the conduct of naval drills. So because the US and its allies sailed there, citing the Arbitral Award, China cannot make the 10-dash line its international boundary. That is the objective of China, to make the 10-dash line its international boundary. In the recent map of China, they updated their map from 9-dash line to 10-dash line, and they call now the dashes international boundary. But China cannot enforce this because of the Arbitral Award, which the US and its allies are using. However, that is not a complete enforcement because we cannot get the gas in Reed Bank. The gas is within the 10-dash line. Reed Bank is within the 10-dash line. So there's partial enforcement only. Of course, we are not happy with that, but that is international law. International law is not perfect because there is no policeman to enforce it. When you ratify UNCLOS, you bind yourself to comply with any arbitral award. You bind yourself to comply in good faith with any arbitral award. There are 5 countries, nuclear armed states, that lost to non-nuclear armed states in arbitration. The US lost to Nicaragua in the Iran in the Contra conflict. The Americans armed the Contras, the insurgents in Nicaragua, and mined the territorial waters of Nicaragua. The US lost. The US said, we will not comply with the claim for damages, but eventually the US complied. The US said, we will not pay you damages, but we will just give you economic aid in the same amount. So that was settled. There was compliance in effect. In the next case, the Russia versus Netherlands, in the Arctic Sunrise case, Russia lost, but Russia said, we will not comply. But after a few years, Russia approached the Netherlands and said, can you reduce the amount and we will pay the damages? And Netherlands agreed. So there was compliance. The next case was the Bay of Bengal case between Bangladesh and India. India lost, nuclear armed state, against Bangladesh. India immediately complied. The next case is the Mauritius case. UK lost in the Mauritius case. The International Court of Justice rendered an opinion that UK could not detach the Chagos Archipelago from Mauritius. And UK said, yes, we will comply. Only China has not complied with the arbitral award of an international tribunal. So 80% of the states, nuclear armed state that lost, complied. It's only China. But we should look at this at a longer term perspective. We have to explain to the world, isolate China, and I think eventually China will comply. Right now, there is no country that is supporting China's claim that they own the South China Sea. But we have to explain to the world why they have to support us more strongly. I think eventually China will have to comply, but it will take time. Thank you.
Sir, one last question. With the USA now, with its unpredictable nature, and because it's a VUCA world, can we confidently trust us from being protected and depending on the USA?
Well, the 2025 National Security Strategy of President Trump proposed a spheres of influence. China will have its spheres of influence in the South China Sea. Russia will have its sphere of influence in Eastern Europe, and the US will have its sphere of influence in South America and North America. That is a big problem because President Xi and President Trump are going to meet this May in China for a summit. And although China has refused this spheres of influence concept, I think they will accept it eventually because they're actually practicing it now. By claiming the entire South China Sea, that is a sphere of influence. They're claiming influence over all littoral states around the South China Sea. So I think it's just a strategy on their part to refuse the offer of Trump. But I think eventually they will accept it, if not formally, but in practice, because in practice they're doing it already. So what do? We have to oppose it. We have to talk to South Korea, Japan, Taiwan, even Australia, that we have to oppose this spheres of influence concept of President Trump. And the Japanese are opposing it already, and the Koreans are against it. But we have to make it a policy, because if China and the US will agree that China could treat the South China Sea in the same way that the US treats Latin America, then it will be bad for us. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you, Justice Carpio, and thank you, ma'am. Another question from sir. Go ahead, sir.
Yes, I'm 𝗷𝗶𝗃. I'm a retired ambassador. Before I ask Justice Carpio my question, I'd like to answer that question on reliance on the US. The events in the Gulf clearly show that Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the UAE, etc., cannot be protected by US military might. Their bases are under attack now. Their infrastructure is being destroyed. So my unequivocal answer is we cannot rely on the US. We cannot rely on the US. It's very dangerous to put all our security eggs in one basket, the US, because it's clearly the bases, the EDCA sites can be a magnet for attack. Now, to my question to Justice Carpio, I am shocked at the vociferous attacks of the PCG spokesman. This fellow, all of the noise against China is not helping our case vis-a-vis the Chinese. Showing Xi Jinping his caricature in a video presentation, I think was really way below. That was out of line. So my question is, the Reed Bank, isn't the Reed Bank issue an opportunity for both sides to work out an arrangement whereby we can probably, setting aside questions of sovereignty, no? Just by direct negotiations with the Chinese, agree on a sharing scheme with respect to the maritime resources in the area.
Well, during the last year of the administration, then Secretary of Foreign Affairs 𝗷𝗿𝗁𝗶 signed an MOU with China and a terms of reference with China. I was consulted, and I said, as long as the MOU over Reed Bank to jointly develop Reed Bank will say that, one, the cooperation on developing the gas there will follow our service contract system. And second, Philippine law will apply. And China agreed. We signed the MOU. I was surprised. It was signed. And then the terms of reference was signed. At the last minute, when the Philippine National Oil Company, when the Chinese National Offshore Oil Company and Forum Energy, which held still holding now Service Contract 72 over Reed Bank, we're about to sign, China made a last-minute demand. China said, we have to remove that phrase, whereas the service contract system of the Philippines shall apply. And we have to remove the phrase Philippine law will govern. And I agreed with 𝗙𝗵𝗶𝗶𝗹 saying that is too much, that will violate the Constitution. And he pulled out, and that is what happened. So, because China wants us to say the resources in our zone do not belong to us. It's under question. And we have already the arbitral award. That would mean that we are disavowing, we are refuting the arbitral award. I said we cannot do that. So that's it. I was talking to the Vietnamese and the Malaysians, and they said, if China will agree that the service contract will be under our laws, we will enter a joint venture 50, because our constitution limits it to 60-40. I said, we cannot do a 50-50, we can only go up to 60-40. But they said, as long as China will recognize that that is our exclusive economic zone, we'll give them 1/2. Vietnam also told me that. But I thought that we have found already the formula. But at the last minute, China demanded that we erased everything, and everything is under question. If you go to the website of the Chinese foreign minister, it says there, China will enter into a joint development with other states on the assumption that, one, the resources belong to China, and two, China is agreeing to a joint development in order to have good relations only. So, well, we cannot do that. So that's our big problem, because Malaysia under Anwar was able to get the gas in Kashiwara. Despite the threats of China, the Chinese Coast Guard said you cannot survey and drill in that area that's within the 10-dash line. Anwar said, it's a matter of national interest. We have to get that gas. So Anwar sent the drill ship and the Malaysian Navy. At the same time, US warships and Australian warships were conducting naval drills. So Malaysia was able to get the gas, completed their drilling. The same thing happened with Indonesia. 𝗷𝗍𝗶 at that time said, we will send our drill ship together with our Navy. And at the same time, the US aircraft carrier Ronald Reagan passed by. The Chinese Coast Guard couldn't do anything. So Indonesia was able to complete its survey and drilling. But we have not done it. The Americans have offered to have a joint patrol with us when we sent our survey ship and drill ship to Reed Bank, but we demanded more. We asked the Americans to be there 24/7 the whole year round. And of course, they cannot do that. So nothing is happening in Reed Bank. The gas prices have gone up. Malampayas is running dry. It used to supply our 3 largest gas-fired plants in Luzon. It's supplying only 1 now. And maybe next year it will not supply anything anymore. What the group of Ricky Rason has discovered, I don't think that's substantial. So we don't have the political will, unlike Malaysia and Indonesia. That's our big problem. Thank you.
All right. We can entertain one last question. Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, sir. Thank you for the lecture. I'm Henry 𝗷𝗶𝗶𝗹, advocate of heritage. My question is, are you in favor for the Philippines to become a member of the ICC again? And if your answer is yes, how would it will reinforce our claim in the West Philippine Sea, or having a contract with China for the resources in the West Philippine Sea?
Your first question is, am I in favor of joining the ICC,
Again,
International Criminal Court?
yes.
Yes, I've said that many times already. And then your second question is, How do we enforce our claim?
Yes.
Our claim to the West Philippine Sea, our
Yes.
EEZ?
Yes.
Well, as I said, there's partial enforcement of the arbitral award because China cannot make the 10-dash line as its national boundary, but it's only partial because we cannot get the gas. We don't have the political will. Why can Malaysia get the gas and Indonesia get the gas within their EEZ, even if it is within the 10-dash line? Why can't we do it just like Malaysia and Indonesia? I think it's a matter of political will. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so that ends our question and answer portion. Thank you so much for those who participated in our discussion. And at this point, we will now be hearing the closing message from our Assistant Director of the National Library of the Philippines, Assistant Director 𝗙𝗵𝗵𝗶é𝗹. Round of applause, please.
Magandang hapon po sa lahat. First of all, very thankful ang National Library, lalo ang ating mga empleyado kasi bumabalik ang tiwala ninyo sa National Library. So ang pangako namin, alagaan namin ang mapang ito at yung mga susunod pa na darating, maalagaan ng maayos, hindi lang nililinis kundi binabantayan na hindi siya mawala. Ayun. At kasama nyo kami sa pag-aalaga ng ating cultural heritage. So, yun lang po at para magkaroon din tayo ng time na bumisita po dun sa gallery. Salamat po muli.
Thank you, Sir Ed. Before we go, we will have another photo op. So we would like to invite our guests to please stand up. Our cameraman will be taking the photo on stage. So everyone will be included in this photo op po. All right? Pwede pa pong lumapit yung iba dun sa bandang likod para makita rin po kayo. Thank you. Okay. All right. Another round of applause. And that concludes our program. On behalf of the National Library of the Philippines, we thank everyone for your presence and participation in today's meaningful event. We now invite everyone to for a refreshment on the other side of this room. Again, good afternoon and please be safe. Salamat po sa lahat ng mga competent. Sa mga nasa Facebook page din po natin, thank you all for watching our live stream. Thank you.